So I'm going to give you a review of this book, but let me just tell you this. In one of the first few chapters, 7 of 9 quite literally enters a gay club, ends up making out with an Andorian who she later takes home for a one-night stand, and yeah, that's really just everything that I've ever wanted from Star Trek, so 10 out of 10, no notes. Hello interwebs, I am here actually to give you an earnest review of the latest Star Trek book release, this time a Star Trek Picard tie-in novel release titled Firewall by David Mack, focusing on the backstory of 7 of 9 as it takes her from basically right after the end of Star Trek Voyager to where we see her within Star Trek Picard Season 1 and showing her getting involved in the vigilante group, the Fenris Rangers, the group that's sort of on the outskirts of the Federation, helping those who the Federation and Starfleet has let down in the wake of the Romulan supernova effort where Starfleet went and sort of sent all of their energy towards helping the Romulans, leaving a power gap that the Fenris Rangers try to fill while also dealing with all the different warlords and different tyrants that want to try and take over in that power vacuum. So that's the basic setup for this novel, and what I will say is this novel continues my very clear belief, which is the best thing to have come out of the Star Trek Picard brand, I guess you would call it, is the novels. As many of you know, I have not been a huge fan of the Star Trek Picard series. It's actually my least favorite of any Star Trek series, and the main reason for that is that I ultimately felt it was relying a little bit too much on nostalgia, especially in Season 3, but you can even see it in Seasons 1 and 2, and not really fully utilizing the cool ideas that they had for these characters in the first place. Like, the element of Star Trek Picard that I do love, because there are elements of the show that I do really like, is its initial willingness to take characters that we loved from, the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager era, and putting them in situations that felt like it wasn't just them on a Starfleet ship doing the thing that we always see Starfleet characters do, and actually testing them and putting them in new places. And while the Star Trek Picard show never fully took advantage of that to, I think, the degree that it really could have, these novels have certainly been doing that, and I have actually just been feasting on any Star Trek Picard novel comes out, because I think it ultimately is just the best part of that side of the franchise right now in terms of like telling us stories with these characters that we came to love in the 90s and early 2000s. But with that being said, what I will give as a caveat is I don't think that this novel reaches the heights of, say, Star Trek Picard's Second Self, which is personally one of my favorite Star Trek novels ever, one of my favorite Star Trek stories ever, and I think is just a phenomenal book, regardless of what you feel about tie novels. Nor does it reach the highs of like Rogue Elements, which is a sort of look at the backstory of Cristobal Rios, which I thought was a really beautiful story. So this Firewall novel with 7 of 9 does not hit that height, but I still think it's a really fun adventure that I think does a great job of letting us see the arc from where 7 of 9 was in Voyager and where 7 of 9 entered into Star Trek Picard, because there is a vast off-screen character change that you can kind of see the trajectory of how 7 gets from there to that. You can kind of assume based on what we're told. It was sort of a very different shift from the very like Borg-like character that we saw in Voyager to the more vigilante character that we see in Picard. And this novel does a really good job allowing us to track that story emotionally for 7 of 9 in a very believable way. And I'll stay spoiler-free, but honing in on 7's emotional journey here, I think David Mack really captured a core essence of 7's character that we saw in Voyager, which is she was someone who was afraid of being alone, yet also found it hard to let people in, coming out of her, being in the Borg Collective, but also not being a person within the Borg Collective. So she wanted to be around people, but it was hard for her to be a person with them. And we see, while she was able to build that family on Voyager, when she gets to the Federation, especially the Federation post-Dominion War that we sort of see into Star Trek Picard, it has become much more hawkish and much more fearful. And as a result, they push her out as an ex-Borg. And that fits into the sort of geopolitical setting of Star Trek at that time, and allows her as a character to feel isolated and want to seek out and do something different and see where she fits in and find her own little queer found family in the Fenris Rangers. And I thought that was a really great emotional arc for her. And what I love is how that comes coupled with, we get little bits of now Vice Admiral Janeway in here, and we get little snippets of her life between where we saw her in Voyager and where we see her in Star Trek Prodigy. And there actually is a couple small tie-ins to Star Trek Prodigy within this novel, which is a little fun for a little Easter Easter eggs if you want to look for them. But it was really cool to see Janeway's point of view in this story, because we do get bits of her where she is feeling frustrated with where Starfleet's at the moment, but still trying to believe in it and trying to pull Seven back from what she sees as her falling into a dangerous group with the Fenris Rangers, which are kind of think they're very similar to the Maquis in how Starfleet views them, and sort of like sees them as sort of this vigilante group, and there's sort of a propaganda campaign. Like, it was really fun seeing some of the politics that go into this book, and that's sort of the fun of a lot of the Star Trek Picard novels, is that we get to see a lot more of the sort of influence of the political side of the Federation than we necessarily would get to see in like Next Generation or Voyager. It was just like a Starfleet ship out on the frontier, and feels more Deep Space Nine in that way. So I really enjoyed those elements of it. But the core of the story focuses on Seven of Nine joining the Fenris Rangers for what she thinks is becoming an undercover Starfleet officer, but there's more to that story, again, I won't spoil, and eventually getting drawn into this sort of found vigilante family as they take down this sort of kind of I want to say warlord guy, Kogish, who is trying to consolidate power in this region. And what I love about Kogish as the antagonist in this novel is he is not this sort of overbearing, like, I got all this, I'm super powerful. Like, a lot of his motivations in this book are just about like scrambling to get enough money to buy resources that he needs. So you kind of get this vibe that everyone on this sort of forgotten side of the Federation is all just scrambling for what they can get out of the little pieces left behind by the Federation as they've gone on to help the Romulans deal with the Romulan supernova. And I thought that was such an intriguing way to write a villain, because it would have been very easy to just have a character who's just like, yeah, I'm the super powerful and you have to come and take me on. I'm this big warlord guy. But really, you just see like he's just trying to get money. He's just trying to like get as much money as he can and wring every penny out of everybody he can. Very gangster-like. Made it feel very believable. And you really see Seven of Nine wrestling with the ethics of that, because she's used to being someone who has all these resources at her hands, both within as part of the Borg, but then also as even on Voyager, which it was very isolated, still was a Federation ship which had a lot more power than she's used to, and so here she has to kind of work within this ragtag group who doesn't have all these resources, who doesn't have as much of a ability to hold people accountable, and so she doesn't have like as strong as a chain of command as Starfleet does, and so sometimes she her tendency to play sort of rogue, as we saw in Voyager against Janeway, gets her into a lot more trouble than she does in Voyager, because the mistakes are much greater. The consequences are much greater. It's entire planets, entire societies that are in the balance. And I think that just extending Seven in that way, I think was a great evolution for a character. And again, just lets me track really well where she was in Voyager into where she ends up in Picard. It feels so believable. Like I think Jerry Ryan did a very great job in Picard, like really making that Seven of Nine feel like Seven of Nine and feel like an evolution, but there was missing pieces. And here it feels so good to get that backstory, because I can track now, oh, this is how she got there. This is how that character who felt so stiff and closed off in Voyager slowly opened up her shell, but also still had the same core issues that she had from Voyager that just sort of developed over time, and the mistakes that she made to get to that person that still felt very isolated and pushing people out in Picard, but had become a little bit more human in her affectations. The best way I can sell this book, if any of that didn't make sense to you, or you're still curious on the fence, is if you liked, there was an audio drama from a few years ago that took place between seasons 1 and 2 of Picard with Seven and Raffi. It was an audio drama where Jerry Ryan and Michelle Hurd sort of reprised their characters. It was very good, and you kind of got to look in to them rejoining the Fenris Rangers to face off against a Romulan warlord, a different warlord. If you enjoyed that, you will enjoy this, because it has a very interesting sort of similar structure in the sense that you like get to know the Fenris Rangers, you get to see them a little bit more. This gets into more like the nitty-gritty of the setup of the Fenris Rangers and some of their politics and their organizational style that one didn't really, because it was just sort of a one-off tale, and this one has a lot more time to play with the intricacies of all of that. But if you vibed with that, I would highly recommend it. And this book just reminds me like my feeling of where I think Star Trek needs to go. You know, a lot of people are saying they want Star Trek Legacy. They want a Star Trek Legacy show. And I understand that impulse. I would love a Star Trek Legacy show to revisit some of the characters that I really love from Star Trek Past. But my worry with a Star Trek Legacy series is that it would just become more of what I think killed the franchise a little bit in the early 2000s, which is just doing what we all expect Star Trek to do. Oh, being on a ship named Enterprise or something similar, going out and exploring planets week to week. And again, I love that style of storytelling. It's why I love Star Trek. But I feel like we have that with Strange New Worlds. And I've seen that a lot with a lot of different shows, especially with these characters. And so I think stuff like this, where we get to see 7 of 9 doing something with the Fenris Rangers, still feels like Star Trek, because not only is it in the world, but it is about like finding found family, working with a group of people to try to make things better. But it's a different context for those themes and ideals within this setting that feels fresh and feels different and feels new. And that's what I wanted Star Trek Picard to do, that it ultimately felt by the end disinterested in doing. And what I worry that Star Trek, by becoming this like super big like brand IP that they constantly want to sell, is ultimately going to miss, which is take risks with these characters, takes risks with what you can do with Star Trek, and still play with those themes and ideas, and even characters, but do something new with them instead of doing something that we see every single day. We've already, not every single day, but like I've already seen in other Star Trek shows before, because that's the problem with Voyager and Enterprise. They became Star Trek The Next Generation light instead of taking full advantage of their like interesting conceits. And I think these novels really do that very well. All the Star Trek Picard novels, I think I would highly recommend because of that. And like I said, I don't think this one necessarily hits the highs of the ones that I've loved the most of the Star Trek Picard novels, but I still think this is very solid. So if you love 7 of 9, if you love some weird fringe aspects of the Star Trek world, if you love queer characters being super queer, because that is definitely in here too. There's some lovely, as someone who, Andorians are my second favorite species behind the Trill in Star Trek, and 7 of 9 is my second favorite Star Trek character, well, third favorite now because of Tendi, but third favorite Star Trek character behind Tendi and Jessie. Like all of that stuff just landed for me, and I really enjoyed this novel. So highly recommend this book for all the reasons that I said. Go out and buy it if you have not yet. I think it'll definitely be worth your time. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think of Star Trek Picard Firewall. Do you agree with my take on the state of the franchise, on this book, on this story, on this character? I'd love to hear all that down below. But beyond all of that, I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper.